Somewhere along the way, we were taught if you don't figure it out early, you failed. That confidence should come naturally, and that bravery should show up on time. Neville Longbottom never got that memo. Welcome back, fellow mages, to the Grounded Mage, where we explore how myth and magic exist in everyday life. Neville wasn't the chosen one, although he was a candidate, and I do often wonder what would have happened if Voldemort picked him over Harry to mark as his equal, but that's not my field. My field is facts. Neville was clumsy, forgetful, and constantly told, directly or indirectly, that he wasn't enough. And for a really long time, he believed it. But Neville's story isn't about a sudden transformation. It's about what happens when someone grows after everyone else has counted them out. Today, we're talking about late bloomers, self belief, and the psychology of becoming brave when you think it's already too late. And if that last sentence made something tighten in your chest, welcome. You're in the right place. Let's get into it. Let's start with who Neville was before we ever saw who he could become. Because Neville didn't just struggle, he was labeled. Not talented, not confident, not chosen. Even his family thought he was a squib. And even I have to admit that for the first 3 books in the Harry Potter series, I don't like Neville very much. I read all of the Harry Potter books every year, all 7 of them, and I know exactly how Neville turns out. I know exactly who he becomes, and yet I still find myself for the first 3 books just reading it and going, shut up, Neville. And it's awful because I know by the end of book 4, I start to like Neville, and by book 6, I love him, and book 7 shows us and him who he really is. Anyway, back to Neville's story. His own family thinks he's a squib, someone born into a magical family who possesses no magical power. Think Argus Filch. But imagine that for a second. You grow up in a world where magic is everything, and the people who love you most are quietly relieved when you show the bare minimum of that. His grandmother's high expectations of him, combined with his clumsy and forgetful nature, led to his crippling self-doubt and low self-worth. What eventually triggered Neville's magical powers? His great uncle threw him out of a window. Yes, literally held Neville outside of a window and dropped him. He bounced safely, of course, which showed his family that he did have magical powers, but oh my goodness. Like, can you imagine that's how somebody found out you could do something? Like, it's like us millennials and older generations being thrown into the lake and being told to swim. I mean, granted, that's how a lot of us did learn, but was it the best method? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Neville's childhood experiences don't just shape skills, they shape identity. Psychologist Carol Dweck talks about fixed versus growth mindsets, which we talked about in last week's episode. It's linked in the description down below. But Neville's story goes deeper than mindset. This is about expectancy effects, the idea that what people expect of us subtly trains us to meet those expectations. Neville wasn't just bad at magic early on. He was anxious, forgetful, and hesitant because he was constantly bracing for failure. And here's the important part. He wasn't lazy and he wasn't incapable. Just think about how hard he worked in the Order of the Phoenix just to get one spell right. He was determined. He was hardworking. He was just living under the weight of chronic self-doubt. Where in your life were you labeled? And how long did you live like that label was permanent? Are you still living like it's permanent? If you don't really know Neville's story, it's important to note that his parents were tortured into insanity when he was only 16 months old. And this leads to him being orphaned and forced to be raised by his paternal grandmother, who is very strict, and she expects Neville to live up to his parents' legacy. And the wizarding world just expects Neville to move on from this experience. No therapy, no processing, no real room to grieve. Modern psychology would likely frame Neville as a child with complex trauma, not because of what happened to him, but because of what happened around him. And trauma doesn't always create loud symptoms. It creates low confidence, difficulty trusting your instincts, a deep fear of getting things wrong, and hypervigilance, which is a state of exaggerated awareness of potential dangers. Basically, the nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for threats. This often happens right after experiencing trauma. It leads to being on guard, jumpy, and easily startled, even when there are no real threats around. Very often associated with PTSD, the survival instinct is just in overdrive. Sound familiar? Psychologist Elaine Aron, who studied highly sensitive people, notes that sensitivity is often mislabeled as weakness, especially in achievement driven environments. Neville wasn't weak. He was sensitive in a world that rewarded boldness. And here's something to remember: sensitivity plus safety becomes wisdom. Sensitivity without safety becomes fear. Hogwarts wasn't safe for Neville. Not emotionally, anyway. So, of course, he bloomed late. Let me ask you something. What part of you learned to stay small because it didn't feel safe to grow yet? Neville doesn't have a glow up montage. No sudden confidence, no overnight competence, no dramatic turning point. Just years of quiet persistence. This is where his story becomes uncomfortable because it mirrors real life. Psychologist Eric Erikson talked about life stages and identity development, but modern research shows that identity formation is nonlinear. Some people don't form confidence until their 30s, their 40s, or even later, when the pressure finally lifts. Neville doesn't improve when he tries harder. He improves when he finds the right mentor in Professor Sprout, the right environment, like joining Harry's Defense Against the Dark Arts classes with other people who want to see him succeed, and the right kind of validation. Think about this moment from the Order of the Phoenix. Neville looks at Harry in dismay because he can't get his Patronus charm right. And all he can say is, "I'm trying." And Harry looks at him and says, "I know. Keep trying." That matters because confidence doesn't come from force. It comes from fit. Ask yourself, where have you been trying to grow in the wrong soil? Let me know in the comments down below. Let me pause you here because if you're still listening, I want you to hear this clearly. Neville Longbottom doesn't become brave because he finally believes in himself. He becomes brave because the moment requires him to do so. This is important. We're told once you're confident, then you act. But psychology and Neville say the opposite. Action often comes first. Belief follows. So, if you're waiting to feel ready, you might be waiting forever. Stay with me because the final version of Neville isn't about confidence at all. It's about values. Picture it, because I know you're here because you've at least seen the movie. Neville hobbles out of the crowd, battered, bruised, bloodied, and he stands up to Voldemort, giving this really moving speech about how so many people had died that day, and Harry didn't die in vain, but Voldemort will die in vain. Harry's heart beat for all of us, and then he pulls the sword right out of the hat, eventually killing Nagini, which aids Harry in saving the entire day. Neville is not fearless in this moment. He's actually terrified. But psychologist Stephen Hayes, the creator of acceptance and commitment therapy, defines courage like this: courage is taking action in service of your values, even in the presence of fear. Neville doesn't suddenly feel powerful, he feels responsible to protect, to resist, to stand. And that's the shift. Bravery isn't a personality trait, it's a choice aligned with meaning. Neville stops asking, "Am I good enough?" And he starts asking, "What matters enough to act anyway?" That's when everything changes. Let me ask you something. What value have you been postponing because you thought you needed confidence first? Let me know in the comments down below. Here's the myth that we need to dismantle. If it hasn't happened yet, it won't. Research on adult neuroplasty actually shows that the brain continues to change throughout life, especially when motivation is tied to meaning. Neville didn't peak early, he ripened slowly, and that slowness gave him empathy, resilience, and moral clarity. Traits that you can't rush. So, if you feel behind, you're not broken. You may just be becoming. Here are my final reflection questions for you for today. What season of growth are you actually in? Who would you be if you stopped measuring yourself against early bloomers? And what brave, values based action is quietly waiting for you, even if you're scared? Please give me a comment down below and let me know. Neville Longbottom reminds us that people who struggle the longest often stand the strongest when it counts. Not because they're fearless, but because they know what it means to be overlooked and still choose to show up. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. Where do you see yourself in Neville's story? And what part of you might still be blooming, right on time for your life? If you enjoyed this, share it with someone who thinks they're too late. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps this content reach people who might enjoy it or just really need it. Next week, we look at Wanda Maximoff's better half, Vision. Until next week, fellow mages, make it make magic.